the recording later, and for those who can't join us in synchronous time, they'll have access to it as well. So welcome back for week 6. This is kind of the halfway point, so that's exciting. We're going to talk about customizing the player today, which has some planning aspects of it. And then there's also the programmatic articulate storyline aspects of it. So I'm going to go through the slides pretty quick today, and then we're going to shift over to articulate storyline, which if you do have storyline 3 already, they released an update today, which I went ahead and installed, which I normally wouldn't do on a training day, except for they said that they made the player work faster now. So I'm like, well, that was pretty nice alignment of the universe. So that's going to help us out. So things we're going to talk about this week are customizing the player, customizing the resource tab. So that's going to be, so the player is the outside framework that holds all of your content. There's a menu there, there's colors, there's navigation, but there are also these extra tabs, which are the resource tab, and there's also a glossary tab, which I've never made use of, but would certainly be a really practical way to use SPARC or TRAC. So resource tab is going to always be available to students as they go through. And so we do make a point in one of our early videos in the SUNY Oneonta version of in the upper left corner, or upper right corner, there's this resource tab. If at any point you want to reach out to somebody, it's right there. So how do you get all of your folks on campus listed into that resource place? And just a reminder, if you're not already officially in the system of being on our list and having access to all the training materials, this is a bit.ly that you can use, or this longer link as well will get you links to the book that we're working off of, all of the practice files, and the links out to the YouTube postings of the videos. So all of those kinds of things are right there. So moving along. So today we're going to talk about how to get to the player, and I will have to share that from my own experience of when I was building SPARC. At some point I was like, geez, how do you get to that thing? Like, that's a part of the thing. How am I going to do that? And realize that there's a whole lot of stuff to do in getting the player happening and functioning in a way that you want it to. So that's kind of why it's at this point, because hopefully, you know, if you're following along step by step, you've got videos in production, you're working on your video content, or you've got your video content somewhere along the lines of getting ready, getting done, maybe already done, all of your text and all those other things. So this is a good time to think about how is it all going to come together now in this outer framework, because for our students who are our end users, this is really how they're going to get through all of that content. So choices you're going to be able to make. There's here, again, we can talk about layout. There are color choices. In terms of navigation, there's something called free navigation and restricted navigation. We're going to talk about that. Free navigation means that they can click through anything they want, which is a really great way if you want to offer this in an HTML format as a resource afterwards. And then there's also player navigation. How we turn off some of those things is actually in story view. So we're going to go over to storyline in just a second. There's all of these different tabs in the player. We'll go through each one, but this is where you upload all of your resources, where you upload your glossary and colors, effects. There's some tab order kinds of things that we can get into in here. And I think that's where we're going to go. So I'm going to shift over now. I'm going to stop this share. We're going to skip over to storyline, which I already have up here. All right. Need to get all my windows. So here we are in story view, and this is something we've done quite a few times. Over in this lower right-hand corner, we have these slide navigation buttons. And if you'll notice, these are all unchecked, but by default, every slide that you create in Storyline is going to have all of these turned on, and these are going to show up in the player. So, and actually I got a question via email during the last week, and this is a good point to talk about the answer and what the question and the answers to that. So I have published my SPARC in 2 different ways. I've published it for an LMS, which is BlackBoard on my campus, and I've also published it for HTML, which results in basically something that I can deliver via a website. I can just upload a whole folder of content, send people to the main link, and then it reads like a website. So I use the the LMS version to deliver the content the first time students see it, and I do it in a very restricted way where I'm controlling how they get from one slide to the next. It's mandated content, so I need to control for that. I don't want them to be able to like, oh, I don't want to listen to Rebecca talk about the definition of consent and just skip out of that, because we know that's dictated in 129B that we have to cover affirmative consent. So we want to make sure students review or have access or have to sit through the viewing of that slide. But what I also want is I also want to seed this idea that this is a resource that students can come back to later. All of the answers to a lot of the questions that students might have initially are really embedded in SPARC. So what I do is I ultimately build the LMS version, which is what you see here, which each scene is its own little thing, and I upload them individually into the LMS. But then I go back and I make a version that's more HTML friendly. So I create one more scene. I use that as a navigation space, and that becomes kind of a place where you can log in and then you see all of it. So if you've gone, I think both samples are up there, and if you look at the sample version of SPARC that I've produced that's up on the website, that's the one that you're seeing as that HTML version. You're always coming back to the same navigation page and choosing which module to go view from that. In that situation, that's a free navigation version, that HTML one, open resource, kind of open book. And the way I let students know that that exists is then I deliver the 4 modules of content that I've built in Storyline, uploaded into Blackboard via the LMS and the SCORM 1.2 file. But then what I've done is I've built a quiz in Blackboard, because the quiz metrics in Blackboard, the LMS, and my guess is whatever LMS you're using, the quiz metrics are going to be a lot better if you use the LMS quiz, because then you can drill down question by question and look and see what percentage of students get them right on the first attempt or need multiple attempts. But then what I do is at the beginning of that quiz, I embed a link to the free HTML version, say you can actually take this quiz as an open notebook, open book exam. Here's where you can go find that content. And then that gets students kind of clicked over, and we let them know that then it's a resource available moving forward. So ultimately, the biggest changes happen in the player, and the players are different in a couple of places. So that said, I do want to turn off these on and off buttons. So right now what we're going to do is pop over to the player. So the player can be accessed through any of the ribbons. So no matter which version I'm in, no matter which version of the ribbon I'm in, let's see, I have to move my Zoom stuff here. So wherever we're at, we always have like these published areas. In this case, we've only got the preview option, but most of the times we also have this player option. So we're going to click this, and this is what's going to launch. Basically, it's like a program within a program where we have all of these things that we can choose to do. So let me get my list over here to the side. Zooming and presenting with 2 monitors is a whole new level of Zoom. Some of you, I'm sure, have learned that. So here we go. So at this point, the content area is grayed out. It just lists slide. And here's all of these pieces of content that I can choose and control. So I can choose which things are there. If I want resources, if I don't want a resources tab, that goes away. If I want a glossary tab, I can click that, shows up over here. When we were building out in the slide view stuff, and there was that notes tab area, there was the timeline, the states, and then there's a notes tab. You can also put additional educational content in that space. And if you turn on this notes thing, then it'll draw that information in from each slide and make that available to the user. So I haven't come up with a clever use of that yet, but if anybody comes up with one, let me know. I could see where maybe if you're training people to give a presentation, like you could export one version and it would have that notes view, and you could use that as a training tool, because you could just turn it on for the people you need it and publish it once. You could turn it off and publish it again. So you can choose where all of these things are going to happen. You can add new things here. You can reorder stuff. I think a lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward. So the title here, and again, these are things that I change out for each different. There's some things that are available in 2 different places. So we're going to see this again when we get to the unit on publishing. But this right here, I can change right out, and it's going to automatically, let's see, it's June 2020 today. And so we get that change in status over here. So I do like it. Again, for me, because doing each of my modules separately by changing the module name in there. If I have a student who's struggling and I ask them to send me a screenshot, then I get that little bit of information back. So that's helpful. I can choose where I want my sidebar, if I want it on the left, if I want it on the right, and I get that immediate feedback over here. And I would say this is the thing that they said was made faster, and this is absolutely much faster. Do I want captions? Obviously, we all want captions. I don't know why that's still a choice to turn that on and off. The volume button. So again, these are all just how our students are going to utilize and see this information. The search bar is the one that, again, you know, for a mandated content, we may or may not want to create that, but in an unrestricted version, maybe we do want to provide that. A seek bar is what we, I mean, I'm sure you're, now that you see this, if you didn't know the name of it, you totally know what it is. So again, for mandated content, we don't necessarily want people to be able to move themselves. And from what I've tested, that if you do make the seek bar available, it does allow them to just kind of grab it and drag it to the end. So you might not want to do that. Student can always replay the video at the end if they've missed something. So that's a choice that you're going to have to make. It does say allow user to drag seek bar, and that does seem to be a new thing. So maybe this is what the right possibility is. And then this logo thing here is what is up here in this top left corner. So whatever kind of logo you want to use in there. And again, we ask that you credit SPARC, but if you want to brand this to your campus so it makes sense within the context of your established program, I think that's a really smart idea. So if, you know, Lisa Evanescu wants to put her, you know, It's on Oz stuff in there with powered by SPARC, that would totally make sense because that's going to resonate with your campus, and that's totally what we want you to do. So if I X this is going to delete that, and then I'm going to get, you know, the standard, you know, click to add a logo, and you can go navigate to go find where your logo is. So let's talk about some of the other things in here. So here's really, this features thing here is really these really broad overview kinds of things. Now I think the one that you can also come over here is these colors and effects. This is, to me, like kind of the next level of thinking through. And again, if you have school colors and you're already integrating those into your other slides, here's another place where you can add that in. This is another thing that I do tend to change the colors every year. I've happened only one time I really remember because of the incident with the student, but sometimes students will get screenshots from their friends from previous semesters, so they try not to have to take the class. So making some slight changes is a way to ensure that you can look at something really quick and be like, that's not this semester's SPARC, or that's last year's SPARC. This is a really easy place to make a change to ensure that you're gonna know that right away. So there are some built-in different, let's see, right now we have light blue. So if we switch to black, you know, it brings in all of these different things. You can also get into this advanced color editor, and you can go through bit by bit by bit. And these are lots and lots of different things that you can ultimately change the color on. So again, if you have a very specific set of colors you want to bring in and import, let's see, let's go to the menu here. So if we go to the background, we can change this color over here. I'm not sure if we did this part exists in all different places. If we hit this more colors, we can add custom colors. And so I've done that over here. So this is kind of, I guess, a little bit bonus knowledge. But if you know the HTML code or the hex code for colors, and again, if you're using school colors, reach out to your graphic designers and be like, hey, can I have the hex codes? And you can just plug that right in. You can add it, and then you always have that access, and your custom colors will stay with you throughout the entire program. So let's say we want a background that's this purple. Oh, where did it go? That wasn't fun. So background, we want to change the background to one of these more colors. And now we have the purple from the consent poster that many of you are aware of. So we can go in and we can change all of those things. Also, if there's fonts that you tend to prefer to use, you can make all of those adjustments in here. Curls is probably not the right thing to offer our students. But again, I do tend to use the same fonts over and over again for all content that comes out of my office. So you know, if that's something that you have consciously thought about doing, it makes sense to continue that over here as well. So that's the colors and effects. So let's talk about menu now, because to me, here's the places where we can start to talk about how students are going to navigate through here. So when we were creating slides back in slide view, every slide has the opportunity to name it. And when you name that slide, you know, initially when I was doing this, I was just kind of like roughing stuff out. And then when I started working with the player, I realized that everything that I named that slide came over here and was automatically pulled into this menu. So you can also change them at this point. So let's say, you know, you have campus security on your campus. I double click that and now I've got this opportunity to change that out. So you can reorder stuff. Now the numbers are not going to show up for the students. Then as you can see over here, that doesn't exist over here, but these are the slide numbers. So you can kind of go back. So the slides get numbered in the order that you create them. So you can kind of see what my process was when you look at this. But that automatically changes everything over here. So those are how you're going to change names. You can also move staff, say campus security. I really wanted to show up after health center. I can grab that and I can use these arrow keys and I can move it down. So if something shows up and it's in the wrong order, I think generally what will happen is the first time you run the player, it's going to populate in the order of the slide numbers. So this will allow you to get it to where you want it to go. But this little handy cogwheel over here, this was one of those ones that it took me a while to figure this out. So I want to make sure we give this some space. So here's where we can change the navigation restrictions. So free navigation means that for a student, when they're watching this, they can click on any of these things. And as soon as they click on it, it's going to take them to that slide. So we kind of don't want to do that with that mandated information. So in this case, because this is the file that I've developed for LMS, I'm keeping this in restricted. I haven't really played with locked. I don't really know what that means. I've just kept myself to free and restricted. So free, pretty self-explanatory. You're free to go wherever you want. Restricted means that I'm going to control what you view and when you view it. There are a few other things like this wrap long menu item titles. I've purposely just tried to keep my menu titles. So that's over here. So if you have like a whole sentence here, like I don't have navigation spelled out over here, but it would just kind of move it around. Maybe that's something you want. Do you want the numbered entries over here in the menu? No, I don't want those numbers there. The tooltip on hover, HTML in general is moving away from hover because it's not completely accessible, but it's also okay to leave that one on because I don't think students actually end up using it a whole lot. I think they end up stumbling upon that stuff by accident. So again, to get to that free and restricted menus, this little cogwheel over here, and I think I'm an Android user, so this shows up as the settings choice all the time as a tool. So be on the lookout for that when it shows up because it means it's going to get you into kind of the underbelly of the beast in terms of finding stuff. So here's the resources part of the slide. So here's, it shows up where it's going to be. I'm finding out now that it's going to have the same purple background that I've created over here. So we can start adding resources. What I would recommend, because the first time I did this, it seemed to take forever, is I actually ended up having a student build me an Excel spreadsheet where it had the title and the URL all in there. So I was able to just kind of have my Excel spreadsheet open on one screen and I had this open on the other, and it was just a copy paste job. And it's, I don't know, I'm sure we've all been on that Zoom meeting where your brain needs a little like space to like wander away temporarily without having to work so hard. So, you know, I find it's one of those tasks that, you know, you save it for that day when, or those last 15 minutes of the day when your brain's starting to fade. It's not, you know, I think being prepared ahead of time. But the other nice thing about having it in an Excel spreadsheet is then it's all in one place. It's easy to grab again in the future, and you can add updates or you can email it out to folks and be like, hey, does anybody have any updates? Are there any resources that we're missing in this list? And then you can pull it in. Once you have a lot of resources in here, you also can do the same up and down thing. So ultimately what I ended up doing on my own campus is I put the campus resources first, and then our local resources, and then the state resources. And I grabbed quite a few things off the Saver page and populated a lot of the content. So my guess is you probably do have all this stuff, but I think what I found when I was doing this is like, even though I can get my hands on all this, having it in one place was still a chore. So having that Excel spreadsheet was a little handy tip. So again, this is add a resource, this is copy a resource, this is trash a resource, and it looks like they're letting you now also change what the text is over here. So a nice little thing. So again, this is why we give a shout out to the resource in the first video script that I have in SPARC, because then this will persist through the whole course. So the glossary is not something that I use. It does show up in this tab, and you add content all in the same way. So again, if you want to use the glossary, I would do the same thing. I would probably set up an Excel spreadsheet and have it all in there ready to copy and paste and go in and save it for a day when my bandwidth was not super hot, and just get it all done. But that also probably puts you in a place too where you maybe have a team of people like brainstorm out all the glossary items, and then you put it in a cloud file and have people work on it together. So I think those to me are like the really big parts of the navigation. There are a couple of other little things that I want to show you that are here. So these are all these text labels. These are things that are going to do a little bit more with your accessibility staff. So it allows you to change out what text is read when it's read out loud. So again, this is what's going to affect screen readers. So know that it's here. If you need to change something, you can do that. I think generally what is built in is meeting the needs. I think it describes things pretty adequately, but again, if you have something that you need to change or you need to add, it's all here for you to do that. And then these are some of these last minute things, these other things, and this prompt to resume thing on restart. So if a person times out, we can let them start where they left off. And I did find that with BlackBoard, it did kind of recall that, because what ultimately ends up happening is when the student connects through the LMS, they're pulling down this file, and it is ultimately working through the browser on their computer. And so there are cookies involved in all of the making do of things. So if a student starts a module, if they haven't cleared out their cookies and they come back to the module to finish it, we can ask them to pick up where they left off. They don't have to start from the beginning. So some of the modules are shorter, some of them are longer, but to me, it makes sense to allow them to resume where they left off. I mean, but you can set that to always resume or never resume. Also, locking the player at optimal size. So do we want them to be able to drag it out over the size of their, so basically what happens, they're gonna click and it's going to show up however we've designed it. So we can have it, we can let Storyline decide that, you know what, this aspect ratio is the right size and we're just going to keep it that way, or we can allow the user to like scale it out bigger. This launch player in a new window, and we did ultimately ended up troubleshooting some stuff actually with Student Conduct Institute, because I've assisted them in building their content in Articulate Storyline, and this launch player new window was something that we ultimately found was problematic. It opens up a pop-up, so students do have to have their pop-up blockers turned off, so that can cause problems. So allowing it to just show up in line seems to run a little bit smoother. Again, you know, it might be it's a choice that you and your IT team will have to make, but recognize that this is here and it might cause some wonkiness with how things are displayed. If you launch it in a new window, you have all of these other options that you can choose to turn on or off. So also this disable skip navigation shortcut, I think this is a newer one. So what we were finding is when we put stuff into tab order, and I think next week is when we're going to jump into the accessibility, so we can kind of come back and look at this here, is what I found was that people can tab order and they'll tab order through all of the pieces of content that are on the slide. And if you're using a lot of layers, every time it goes through a new layer, it's going to tab content through all of these pieces again, through the menu, through the glossary, through the title, through the resources. So I think what they're allowing us to do here now is to skip having to cut through that every single time. So I'm going to have to test that and report back, because that looks to be a new thing that Articulate made. But I know when we first started doing this stuff and I was talking with folks who were using Articulate Storyline, Adobe Captivate is really the only other like major program that I'm aware of that is kind of a competition with this from a software standpoint, that folks who do rely on tab order and screen readers were saying that there were problems with Storyline that they did not like. And I believe that this is one of the places where there was some outcry about it not being super friendly. So I think this is a good thing. So anyway, I'm gonna say okay to all of this. And now I'm back here. And when, let's see, let me just pick, here's a simple slide here. I'm gonna come up here back to slide view. So when we preview the slide, we should now see a purple menu when we see that player. So there it all is. You can see the slide playing out. This is based on the timeline that exists on the slide. So the fact that my timeline is set to 5 seconds, that's why it probably takes about 5 seconds. So personally, I find that to be something that's visually troublesome because it takes away your attention. So, you know, removing that seems to make the most sense. So with that said, that's the new content I was intending to present to you all today. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm going to leave my articulate window up for the time being in case you have questions that we need to answer within the software. But if wherever you're at, I'm here to answer questions at this point. And I'm also, right now, I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. So if something occurs to you later in the week, you can send me an email.
Rebecca, would you like me to unmute everyone in case someone wants to ask a question?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, if anybody wants to ask a question, feel free, or if you want to mute yourself, go ahead and do that as well.
Okay. Yeah. Cool beans. So you say she's going to be in when? When is she going to the office?
All right.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything come through yet.
Okay.
Have any questions?
Well, yeah, and I guess I'll say, you know, I want to be mindful of this beautiful afternoon. So, you know, I'm not presenting any further new content today. Next week, we'll be coming back and we'll start looking at how to import videos and insert videos into Storyline. And we'll start looking at the electronic accessibility standards. So how do you do closed captioning? How do you do alt image tags? And how do you do tab order? Because that's really the next big chunk of doing things. So all of the little micro skills that you need along the way to stay on track to get something out. So if you're ready to head out for the day, that's great. And I'm willing to hang here until the last person logs out. And if you think of a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you all for joining us.
I am going to stop my share.